out there at 6 a.m. The man throwing newspapers onto the porch, and the roaming souls suddenly drawn down into their sleeping bodies. Do I have a right to my poems, to my jokes, to my loves? Oh, foolish man, knowing nothing less than nothing about desire.
Robert Bly, he's without question one of the most influential poets in American history.
I have daughters and I have sons. When one of them lays a hand on my shoulder, shining fish turn suddenly into deep sea.
Robert was a father figure to a lot of us.
We really saw him as a threat to the feminist movement.
Perhaps our life is made of struts and paper, like those early Wright brothers planes. Neighbors run along holding the wingtips.
Spiritual reverence and political activism operate together in his work.
It's part of what makes him such a contradictory character. No one quite has a handle on Robert.
I do love Yeats's fierceness as he jumped into a poem, and that lovely calm in my father's hands as he buttoned his coat.
(1968), the deadliest year for U.S. forces in Vietnam. More than 16,000 Americans are killed in action. Back home, opposition to the war grows more public and more confrontational than ever before. On March 6th, 41-year-old Robert Bly steps in front of an audience of black ties and sequin gowns to accept the National Book Award in Poetry for his collection, The Light Around the Body.
This is what he said at the ceremony. These are the first lines. I am uneasy at a ceremony emphasizing our current high state of culture. Cultural events traditionally put writers to sleep and even the public. But we don't want to be asleep anymore. Something has happened to me lately. Every time I've glanced at a bookcase in the last few weeks, the books on the killing of Indians leap out into my hand. This is an amazing speech to make at an award ceremony because it says, look, our culture is complicit and we can't go on pretending that we're just having literary and cultural events which are separate somehow in some way from our actual American history.
But what Bly had planned next would be his grand statement of the night.
And I went to the resistance people and I said, I know how you can get $1,000. They said, how? And I said, well, they're going to give me a check tomorrow night, and I'm going to turn it over to you guys. So I need you to come up when I call you on the stage. You have to wear a suit. One of them said, I know someone who has a suit.
It was at the time when the Chicago 7 were all threatened with jail, Dr. Spock for being against the war. That was for publicly supporting young men who did not want to fight.
At the ceremony, Bly and the other recipients had been forewarned that FBI agents would be in attendance.
He called up a young man from the audience, gave him the check, and said, I advise you now to resist this horrible war. That was a direct invitation, arrest me.
People were cheering, they were standing up. Not everybody, but most everybody.
We became aware that about 10 men in black suits rose up and walked out. Robert Bly was not arrested. Not that night.
If you ask yourself why Robert never became the poet laureate, you might as well ask why it doesn't snow in July in Fresno. I mean, that question is foolish. They pick a guy who's supposed to advance poetry, not advance politics. Robert does not see the two separate. He can't see the two separate.
For him, as an American poet, It's always been very important to mind two sides of the self: a politically engaged, responsible citizen, and an interior mystic.
I remember I was a high school kid, and I was a farmer's son, and I found Rumi of Khayyam. I was plowing in a long field and would memorize one quatrain of Khayyam every time I came. One time I got so fascinated by what was in it that I kept going and drove into the ditch and turned the tractor over. Then my brother and my father had to come and humiliate me, by pulling up the tractor. But that was my first inkling of that. And I responded by turning the tractor over. That wasn't bad. That was all right.
The poetry of an 11th century Persian philosopher was an exotic and enticing contrast to the Norwegian Lutheran community in which Robert Elwood Bly grew up. Born 2 days before Christmas, 1926, his mother Alice took care of him and older brother James, while his father Jacob worked the family farms outside of Madison, Minnesota.
Everyone knew everyone else. There was a certain friendliness, a certain family feeling in that town. I still can close my eyes and see Robert and his brother James standing beside my desk. He was tall and slim and handsome. He had rosy cheeks. He looked like the all-American boy of the 40s. I remember there being a number of very fine students, but he was always at the top.
I used to think that the teachers in school used to learn more from him than he learned from them.
The high school teacher we had very good legs, and she used to sit on the radiator and recite poetry. And I said, now it can't be all bad.
He would write beautifully. He had a great command of the English language.
A growing talent nurtured at home by his mother, Alice.
I think that he and my grandmother were very close. He had a sense that she cared for him a lot and protected him in that he was different in the sense that he was always interested in literature.
The young Bly spent his time reading Wordsworth and Longfellow while working his father's crop fields with his brother, James.
What was a farm like? It was heaven for boys, especially threshing time, when 5 or 6 farmers would get together, and there you were, moving from one farm to the other. You could see all of those, and you were associating with older men, and you tried to work well so one of them would admire you. And it was terrible to have to leave that and go to school. There's a time, things end, the fields are clean, the belts are put away, and the horses go home. What is left endures in the minds of boys who wanted this joy never to end. The splashing of hands, jokes, and oaths. It was a music, touching and fervent. The Bible was right. Presences come and go. Wash in cold water. The fire has moved.
Robert is, in one sense, a life struggling against the America that he found himself growing up in, with its limitations and its strictures and its allowances, particularly for men, what you were allowed to feel and say.
His father was a man who was not capable of showing enormous emotions. best way that he could communicate would be with his work.
Robert's a second son. His older brother really took on the role of farmer. So his father could easily say to him, "You don't have to be a farmer."
James Hillman said, you know, every father comes into the world with a certain way that he wants to father. And every son comes into the world with a certain way that he wants to be fathered. And what if they don't match? I was out in the field as a farm kid. I was waiting with a pickup, and I was listening to some music, pop music. And so I suddenly realized that if I didn't do anything, I'd be listening to this pop music for the rest of my life. I went and enlisted in the Navy the next day.
Bly had to lie about his age. He was only 17 when he graduated high school. After training for 2 years as a naval radar technician, Bly was honorably discharged in 1946, a year after World War II ended.
I was in the Second World War, like a lot of the men in my generation. When we got out of that war, we wanted to do something important or serious.
In 1947, 21-year-old Robert Bly was admitted as a sophomore to Harvard University.
I had thought I might become a doctor, but I didn't know. And then I met some people who had intended to be poets since they were 15 years old, and thought of poetry as a profession.
This group of young poets at Harvard, Frank O'Hara, Kenneth Koch, John Ashbery, they're all there at the same time, and Bly is their equal.
The Minnesota farm boy finally found peers among the prep schoolers in the Ivy League.
I first met Robert Bly in February of 1948. Actually, I call him Bob, and I think I'm the last person allowed to call him Bob. I met him at a meeting of the Harvard Advocate, which was a literary magazine at Harvard, and he was already a member. I found out he was a poet, and we started showing each other everything that we wrote and rewriting each other. But there was no humor. It was nothing flamboyant. It was very conservative. He wore a three-piece suit, and he hardly opened his mouth. He would talk like this. He was very solemn.
Jung says it very well. We have a persona first. And a persona is your personality that your parents like in you. It's what your teachers like in you. Yeah. And this is why in college, we come out of college with this extremely heavy persona. It's a shell around us.
American poetry in the 1950s was extremely rationalistic.
The mood was that poetry was not being heard, and that what poetry was there was excessively intellectual, dominated by the East Coast academics.
An academic approach Bly had grown dissatisfied with.
What we had to learn is that you forget about the future. You're writing for the people who are alive at your time, and you try to move them as much as you can. But in the universities, they don't think of it that way. They have the insane idea that the poet actually writes for posterity, and they keep urging us to write universal poems and so on.
In 1950, Bly graduated with honors. Harvard offered the promising poet a scholarship to graduate school. He turned it down.
So I decided not to go to graduate school on the grounds that I was already too intellectual and told enough lies. You see, if you lie, you're really in your head, because you got to make up the lies in there. Do you understand what I'm saying? If you really try to tell the truth, like if I tried to tell the truth about what was going on in my family, it would have been in high school, ah! It would have been something coming out of my head. The problem I had when I got out of college and I wanted to write poetry, I had to get from here down to here.
From the head to the heart, a quest that began in the wilderness.
I sat up in northern Minnesota for a while, up in a little cabin up there, and I shot a partridge every night illegally to eat, and then I was trying to write Miltonic sonnets. I tried to write poetry out of what I was taught, which was John Donne, John Milton, a few other Englishmen, and it did not work.
Like countless aspiring writers before him, Bly headed to New York City and spent the next 2 years writing and trying to get published.
I made a living as a file clerk 1 day a week, sometimes as a typist 1 day a week. I would be alone for like 2 weeks without talking to anyone. And it felt very painful at the time.
Robert, I think, you find somebody who was very hungry young and spent some times in isolation and spiritual poverty looking for what would feed him.
After another year teaching in Iowa, Bly had reached a dead end.
I go to New York and I live alone. My friends go off to Oxford or something like that. From their point of view, I don't do anything. From my mother's point of view, I don't do anything. From my father's point of view, I'm a flop.
In 1955, Bly married Carol McLean, a young writer whom he had met on a blind date back in college. They would have 4 children together, living on one of his family's farms back in Minnesota.
He and Carol lived in Madison at the beginning and lived without running water or without a toilet. They were living on next to nothing.
A half-mile down the road from his successful father.
Robert and his father. In our culture, that's a naturally fraught relationship, fathers and sons. It's a beautiful thing and a very moving thing, but it's fraught. And Robert's clearly was fraught. His father, of course, was alcoholic. That was a very distancing fact.
I do not want or need to be shamed by him any longer. The general of shame has discharged him and left him in this small, provincial Egyptian town. If I do not wish to shame him, you understand that he wasn't a farmer, he wasn't a college person, and every time I came home and talked to him about D.H. Lawrence and Hardy, I would shame him. Is that clear? That's how I got back on him. If I do not wish to shame him, then why not love him? His long hands, he was a farmer, his long hands, large, veined, capable, can still retain hold of what he wanted. He wanted 8 farms, His long hands, large, veined, capable, can still retain hold of what he wanted. But is that what he desired? Some great river of desire keeps on flowing through him. He never phrased what he desired. He never put into language what he desired, and I am his son.
While Bly's older brother worked to carry on the family legacy, Bly returned to reflect on his stalled literary career.
That's good. I guess we'll just... No, maybe I should take the tractor out of here. In college, I was told if you want to be a poet, you have to be very ambitious and send poems to the New Yorker every 2 weeks. You read the Buddhists and they say if you want to be a poet, you got to give up ambition, period. So I've been reading that and I wrote this one, Watering the Horse. How strange to think of giving up all ambition. Suddenly I see, with such clear eyes, the white flake of snow that has just fallen in the horse's mane. It turned out that I knew certain words. One of them was snow. I knew the meaning of the word snow. I knew the meaning of the word dust. Those words were still connected with the original childhood experiences. So for me, going back to the place where I was born was tremendously helpful to me in getting a hold of words that were genuine and real to me.
He's not in New York, he's not in San Francisco, he's not part of the scene. He's just hanging out with horses in Minnesota, at a sort of crossroads in his life, thinking about, should I stay or should I go?
I'm driving. It is dusk, Minnesota. The stubble field catches the last growth of sun. The soybeans are breathing on all sides. Old men are sitting before their houses on car seats in the small towns. I'm happy. the moon rising above the turkey sheds.
In 1956, Bly traveled to Oslo on a Fulbright scholarship to translate Norwegian poetry into English. The trip would hold a crucial discovery.
He discovered in an Oslo library an anthology of poems, and what amazed him is he knew he had never heard of these people, nor had he heard this kind of voice.
I found a poem of Rolf Jacobsen's. There's a wonderful Norwegian poet, about 60 years old. The May moon goes around like an inspector in a white jacket. The visitors will soon be here. Is everything in its place? This tapestry must be brushed, green rugs everywhere, and candles on the tables. A little music, half muffled, one thrush, a little lark, that's better. And violins, bring up some more small rivers.
What Bly had been seeking since Harvard, he finally found in the imagery of European expressionists and the playfulness of South American surrealists like Pablo Neruda.
I'll never forget the first line of Neruda that I saw happened to be one something like this: young girls with hands in their heart, dreaming of pirates. And it's lovely, both in the willingness to understand young girls and to talk about that and bringing in pirates. It made a wonderful world. There's wonderful enthusiasm for women and for life and for images and all of those things. That's what I found.
And these people ended up changing his view of the world, changing his voice, and he brought those voices back.
I started a magazine sheerly out of my surprise over what was in Pablo Neruda.
The 50s, a poetry journal of translations, new works, biting satire, and critical essays, was put together at the kitchen table with his wife, Carol, friends Bill and Christina Duffy, and a clear agenda.
They sent their first issue to, like, all the poets around America, caused a tremendous stir.
One of the nice things that Robert would do was to take the work of poets who he admired and who were friends of his and critique them as if they were briefly his enemies.
The rejection slips were famous, and people got outraged, of course, which was what they were supposed to do.
For several years, I had that luxury of having Robert be so close, so I could give him my poems in person, or he'd read them there and chop them to bits right there.
When you're beginning to write, your persona will give you lines and your inward being will give you lines. Understand that? Mm-hmm. And since you don't know the difference, the poem is mixed.
And he began to speak about, quote, a wrong turn in American poetry. He brought another kind of energy into American poetry on behalf of the unconscious, the irrational, and image-centered poetry, a different kind of poetry.
How can you describe this incredible new life that people have? You can't describe it in the Robert Browning way or even in, to some extent, the T.S. Eliot way. I didn't do it for the public. I did it for the poets my own age, because I knew they were just as puzzled as I was.
The Bly farm became a magnet for young writers, including James Wright, who wrote Bly praising him for the 50s.
At that point, James Wright had been wondering about his own work, which he felt, to quote Robert Bly, was too old-fashioned. He didn't know where to go, and he had decided perhaps he wouldn't write any more poetry.
Robert wrote him back like a one-page note, "Come and visit me at the farm."
Bly enlisted Wright to help translate South American and German poets for the magazine.
It was a dear friendship, and Jim's work changed entirely.
Wright went on to win the Pulitzer Prize for his next book, which was influenced by all that time together.
If I'd gotten only one gift from the whole labor of the magazine, James's friendship would have been enough.
Perhaps a close second would be the ongoing correspondence with a poet who admired the ambitions of his publication, Pablo Neruda. Bly would receive his great mentor's blessing to publish English translations of his work.
I think Bly's work as a translator has changed not only how we live as readers, but definitely how we live as writers, or American writers of poetry. Partially because we have these other influences that feel so close to home because they've been brought into a living American lexicon.
This is a poem by Basho, the Buddhist poet. He says this, he said, "We're late into fall. I wonder how the man next door lives." Another translation, we're far into fall. The man next door, I wonder what he lives by. You understand that? When you go into fall, you begin to realize you're going to die, and your winter's coming, and the persona weakens in the fall, and the man begins to face his own death and so on. And it's very interesting that at this very moment, Basho suddenly, for the first time in the whole year, wonders what the guy next door, what does he live by? How does he avoid despair and all those things? How does he keep alive?
BLY's coming up at the same time as the New York School poets. Frank O'Hara, James Schuyler, Kenneth Koch, John Ashbery. He's not part of that. He comes up at the same time, a little bit later, but more or less associated with the same time as the Beats, Allen Ginsberg, Gary Snyder, Jack Kerouac. Not part of that.
I viewed Robert as a fellow traveler and fellow worker, laboring in the same vineyards, but you know, the vineyard over the next hill.
They're not so far apart. They were both reacting to the stodgy, dead academicism of mainstream 1950s poetry. The Beats just went one way with it, and Robert and Galway Kinnell and Don Hall went another way.
Takes great pleasure in presenting Robert Bly, one of the most refreshing voices in the American literary scene.
A poem called Driving to Town Late to Mail a Letter. It is a cold and snowy night. The main street is deserted. The only moving things are swirls of snow. As I lift the mailbox door, I feel its cold iron. There's a privacy I love in this snowy night. Driving around, I will waste more time.
Bly received widespread acclaim for his first collection of poems, Silence in the Snowy Fields.
I have a crush on that book. I love it. I know that for me, to go back to it and look at it again is a kind of inflowing of gratitude and pleasure.
On an early morning, I think I shall live forever. I am wrapped in my joyful flesh as the grass is wrapped in its clouds of green. Rising from a bed where I dreamt of long rides past castles and hot coals, the sun lies happily on my knees. I have suffered and survived the night, bathed in dark water, like any blade of grass. The strong leaves of the box elder trees plunging in the wind call us to disappear into the wilds of the universe, where we shall sit at the foot of a plant and live forever like the dust.
The discovery of that poetry is the discovery of an image-centered poetry, a pastoral poetry, really, in the landscape he loved in Minnesota. I thought of him then as a kind of Midwestern Thoreau with a dark side.
Think about that, 1962. That's a pivotal year. It's interesting that the book is called Silence in the Snowy Fields because it comes just before the thaw and it comes just before the noise of the 60s.
Last week's Indochina casualty figures are out today. 2 more Americans killed in the war, 6 lost, either dead, missing, or captured.
Another 24 were lost, missing, captured, or perhaps dead. 13 were wounded.
Let's count the bodies over again. If we could only make the bodies smaller, the size of skulls, we could make a whole plain white with skulls in the moonlight. If we could only make the bodies smaller, maybe we could get a whole year's kill in front of us on a desk. If we could only make the body smaller, we could fit a body into a finger ring for a keepsake forever. I'm not a pacifist. I was in the Second World War, and I thought that war was a just war. Maybe we were wrong, but I still think it was. But I noticed that we didn't count up the bodies of the Germans. We simply said there are heavy casualties in the German front. It's in this war, for the first time, that we've had this disgusting business of counting up every little small Vietnamese body we can find and counting the heads and arms and adding them up into something. There's clearly something else was going on in this war.
11,000 Vietnamese killed today, 12 Americans, 700 to 1. As long as the proportions were favoring our side, nobody really thought of the lunacy of it.
Then, diving, the green earth swinging, cheeks hanging back, red pins blossoming ahead of us, 20mm cannon fire, rice fields shoot past like telephone poles. The hut roofs loom up huge as landing fields, slugs going in, half the huts on fire, small figures running, palm trees burning, shooting past, up again. Blue sky, cloud mountains. This is what it's like to have a gross national product.
Bly co-founded American Writers Against the Vietnam War. He began organizing readings and rallies on college campuses across the country.
My own sense is that the Vietnam War and the opposition to the war galvanized Bly. And in the light around the body, he began to write these poems against the Vietnam War. Poetry was married to politics for him. And I think it always has been, ever since then.
At the height of the Vietnam War, Bly was invited to New York's Poetry Center to be part of an evening honoring his mentor.
Even though there's a lot of bad things wrong with this universe and with this planet, the fact is that this planet also has Pablo Neruda on it, who is the greatest poet alive.
I thank Robert Bly, and I thank all the poets who are with me, proving at least that poetry is not a lonely thing in the world.
This is a poem called The Dictators. An odor has remained among the sugar cane, a mixture of blood and body, a penetrating petal that brings nausea.
Delicado sátrapa conversa con copas, cuellos y cordones de oro. El pequeño palacio brilla como un reloj y las rápidas risas enguantadas atraviesan a veces los...
During the 60s, my God, the psyche was shattered. We really did go to Neruda. We went to many other voices who had suffered in many ways as we did, and we needed to make those connections. We needed to understand it because it was so new to us.
This century is unbelievable in its brutality, especially its national brutality, and the brutality rising in the psyche.
I think of Robert Bly in the same image as I hold Daniel Berrigan and other people, men who went through the war years and realized that America had to take responsibility now in a way it had never taken before.
Most of the poets are not themselves in the war, are not there. Mm-hmm. And Robert Bly's sitting at home attacking a war.
I've been asked it many times in these readings, in which we'd be reading in 1968 or 69 or 67, and there would be a veteran in the audience. And he'd say, well, Mr. Bly, what right have you to make these remarks? You've never been to Vietnam. What do you know what it's about? And I remember one of these guys, he had a tie and a shirt and everything on. So I said, what do you do? And he said, I'm an English teacher here. I said, what do you teach? And he said, I teach Chaucer in the medieval times. So I said, well, were you ever in London in the 13th century? If not, what right have you got to talk about it? You know, that's the truth. Evidently Chaucer lived, we believe he did. And evidently the Vietnam War goes on and people are murdered. You don't have to go there. That's my answer to you for that. Seeing the ropes of seaweed lying in the sand, suddenly I rise into the dream. I'm in a submarine, rolling, whale-like, beneath an immense rock sheath
of the whole world, and I'm not frightened.
After many public years opposing the Vietnam War, BLY moved his family for a year to a small town on the Pacific coast, seeking to nurture, quote, the string of words unborn inside us.
I am the female tiger running, my wife a heavier male tiger following. I hear the love roar as she starts after me, for my footpads fell there to call her. Then once on the other side, she patted my hair, and we were human again.
He was always good at knowing what it was he needed for this next part of his own soul education. What was it his soul needed? The way he knew the image next would come.
BLY began translating the work of the 14th century Sufi poet Kabir.
I said to the wanting creature inside me, what is this river you want to cross? There are no travelers on the river road, and there's no road. Do you see anybody moving about in that bank or resting? There's no river at all, and no boat and no boatman, and there's no tow rope either, and no one to pull it, and there's no ground, no sky, no time, no bank, no fort. There's no body and no mind. Do you believe that there's some place in which your soul will be less thirsty? In that great absence, you will find nothing. Be strong then, and enter into your own body. There you will find a firm place for your feet. Think about it carefully. Don't go off somewhere else. Kabir says this, just throw away all thoughts of imaginary things and stand firm in that which you are.
There's certain paradoxical poetic expressions in the Sufi tradition which Robert was immediately attracted to because of their daring and their audacity.
BLY would draw inspiration from the Sufi poets throughout his career and collaborate on translated versions of others in the ecstatic tradition, including Mirabai, Hafez, and Rumi.
I love Rumi's high spirits, they're so tremendous. And here he's talking a little bit about sexuality.
I met Robert in '71. He had read some scholarly translations of Rumi, and I'd never heard Rumi's name.
Making love in the new way is so marvelous. And what follows is so sweet. It's a reward that makes the affections intense and the energy of the spirit grow.
When Robert handed me my copy of that book, he said, these poems need to be released from their cages. You know, he really is an ecstatic.
Sing a little bit for me, would you? That's it.
I'm always amazed at Robert's capacity to immediately connect in a deep way with mystical traditions and poetic traditions in other cultures. He gets it at the level of language, he gets it at the level of imagination.
It's as if he's saying in his world of tremendous chaos, let's stop for a moment and see what the great gift was of other cultures to us.
The third horn, called the Firebird. And the Firebird started to descend with its enormous wings, dropping red feathers from its breast, which was burning with fire. Feathers were falling everywhere. Can you hear it coming down?
BLY was like a kind of wild amplification of a lot of things that we just didn't know were available anymore. He was like a door from another place or another time.
He
sometimes doesn't seem to live in this world at all. He seems to be living in maybe several worlds at once.
With his flamboyance and shock of hair and gestures in every possible direction.
Even Cicero and many-minded Homer were mad as the mist and the snow.
I've just never seen anything like it.
Another thing, you know, that people remember from Robert is, I'll read that line again. And then somebody, a student is reading a poem, and he says, that's wonderful, read it again, read it again. And that's actually good.
What I've been thinking about is how this decade would be different from the one before. And that wonderful achievement, really, of for the males of respecting something in feminine consciousness, which we were never very terrific at. And then the terrific energy of the women in the last decade was marvelous. But somehow that has to merge. You know what we're talking about. It has to merge with something now and start to move upward.
The inner feminine and the inner masculine. To feed his growing interest in the spiritual self, Bly turned to Freud, Jung, and ancient myths and fairy tales.
Once upon a time, there was a king, and the king had a daughter, and he liked his daughter very much. He liked her a lot. Stories always begin once upon a time. They teach you not to think literally. There are ways that have been used to teach children to think metaphorically from the beginning of time.
Robert knew that it's very difficult for modern man to think metaphorically because we're so embedded in our daily concerns. And fairy tales talk about psychological truths that are always true now, not in the past, not in the future. So that's what he wanted us to tap in.
In the late 70s and early 80s, Robert started working with groups of men and women exploring the symbolism in fairy tales.
At the annual Great Mother Conference, Bly gathered a diverse group of storytellers, psychologists, and mythologists, including Joseph Campbell.
Joe was talking about image. He was talking about symbol. He was talking about this comparative mythology. So, of course, our hearts were open to it.
And you realize the terror as well as the wisdom and charm of this world. And here is the revelation. And it's a revelation of what? Of a mysterium, a mystery. And there are two aspects to it. One is the tremendum, the horrific, and the other is the fascinans, the charm.
Joe was talking about it being there in many cultures, in many places, among many people. And that's exactly, Robert understood that in terms of poetry.
Bly told me once that Campbell revealed that within every great poem, there is a narrative, a story that isn't just about you alone, but it's the story that connects you to all other poets who have ever written.
I was just amazed that Robert actually knew Joseph Campbell, that we were going to actually use myth in events, not just tell a story, but use mythic ideas to bring the myth present.
We were so in tune. There was something very in tune, but we were different disciplines, but very together on the idea of soul and spirit, and the idea of the oral tradition. That was the big thing.
We would go along in these conferences, and we were involved in the other part of it, which was the selling back of candy bars for a profit to these people, and also collecting their beer cans. Apparently, the spiritual path is paved with many aluminum beer cans.
While many saw the Great Mother Conference as a success in a spiritual sense, the events didn't pay the bills back home. Bly traveled for paid readings and engagements, while Carol and their 4 children remained back at the farm in Madison, Minnesota.
So that was a period of time where she was really taking care of us, and her own literary career kind of went on hold.
I wanted the mail to bring some praise for my ego to eat, and was disappointed. I added up my bank balance and found only $65, for I need over $1,000 to pay the bills for this month alone. So, this is how my life is passing before the grave?
Robert and Carol Bly divorced in 1979.
Their split was about when I was around 12. And after it, then she started to publish her books.
Those great sweeps of snow that stop suddenly 6 feet from the house. The boy gets out of high school and reads no more books. The son stops calling home. The mother puts down her rolling pin and makes no more bread. And the wife looks at her husband one night at a party and loves him no more. And the energy leaves the wine, and the priest falls leaving the church. It will not come closer. And the one inside moves back, and the hands touch nothing and are safe. And the father grieves for his son and will not leave the room where the coffin stands. He turns away from his wife, and she sleeps alone. And the sea lifts and falls all night. And the moon goes on through the unattached heavens alone. And the toe of the shoe pivots in the dust. And the man in the black coat turns and goes back down the hill. No one knows why he came and why he turned away and did not climb the hill.
In 1980, Bly married Ruth Ray. The couple moved to Moose Lake, Minnesota, allowing Bly to be close to his children.
I think at different times I did feel jealous of all these people who wanted his attention and how they saw him as this revered figure or maybe father figure, and he was my actual dad, and which is a more complicated relationship. But on the other hand, I felt proud of him.
Will the children let us move forward?
Yes, as soon as you say I was an idiot, I'm sorry. I'm really sorry for what I did and I said to you. Friends of mine are doing that with their children, and oftentimes they begin to weep right away, and so do the children begin to weep. And you say, I'm sorry for that. I'm really sorry.
I remember once talking to Robert, and he said, I've only lived 50% of the artistic life I expected to live, but the other 50% around the family, and the bills, and the pressures, and the stresses of being a simple human being is the stuff that's given resonance and weight to the artistic life I have pursued.
Robert Bly was scheduled to do a reading at McAllister. We'd heard a lot of rumors about him trying to get men back to their kind of more macho roots. And so a number of us from the feminist collective said, we need to go and see what this guy is all about. We focused on a few tidbits of his life, that he had recently separated from his wife. I remember us thinking, he must have left her in the lurch. We had a whole story about him that may or may not have had anything to do with who he was. And when he got up to read, people stood up and they said, aren't you against a woman's right to an abortion? Aren't you against women's equality? People were very vocal. But he just stood there and he said, no, I'm actually not against any of those things. But then he did launch into a talk about how men had lost a sense of who they were, and that he was trying to get men back in touch with their inner selves, which didn't persuade us one bit.
The men's work came out of the Great Mother Conference that Robert and others were involved with, and that Robert noticed after a while that the women were doing rather well. They were, but at the end of those weekends when the men turned up, they were a mess.
He began to read about industrialism and how it took the father out of the family and away from the children, and maybe reflected on his own life.
I realized I didn't know what I wanted to pass on. Am I going to pass on everything I got from my father? Are you kidding? If not, what? and what is eccentric and what isn't eccentric. So therefore, the good way to learn something is to start to teach it.
In 1982, BLY held the first Conference for Men in Mendocino, California. It would grow into an annual event.
We were getting together all across the country on our own. We didn't know what we were doing, but I mean, we had hints. We were trying to connect and figure this out. So by the time Iron John hit, bam!
4 years ago, a most unlikely book hit the bestseller list and stayed there for more than a year. Iron John, a self-described book about men, made heady use of fairy tale, myth, poetry, and psychology to describe the embattled state of the American male. The book was immediately christened the Bible of what became known as the men's movement, and its author, National Book Award-winning poet Robert Bly, became an overnight celebrity.
The commercial success of Iron John surprised Robert perhaps more than it surprised anybody else.
As soon as something like that gets put out in mainstream media, it's gonna get misunderstood, mistaken, and also probably mistreated.
The mass media had a field day with the concept, which even gave birth to a hit sitcom, Home Improvement. Inevitably, a backlash set in, especially from some feminists.
They thought, what? More power for men? I mean, men have been subjugating women since the Neolithic. We can't have any more of that. But of course, that's not what Iron John was about.
My friend, this body offers to carry us for nothing. As the ocean carries logs. So on some days, the body wails with its great energy, smashes up the rocks, lifting small crabs that flow around the sides.
Bly's book considers what it is to be a man in the modern era by examining a Grimm's Brothers fairy tale.
Iron John tells the story of an old, wise, wild man of the forest who becomes a mentor to the young boy and leads and guides him through the various stages of masculine psychic development.
The psychology that is in Iron John, of which there is plenty, is suffused with the mythological. And when you bring the mythological in, it is as if the elevator goes round to the very, very bottom floor.
Robert realized that some of the problem lay in the lack of ritual, especially initiatory ritual for young men and young people in American society.
Whether you call it fathering or mentoring, it's that vertical plane where wisdom gets transmitted and channeled from one generation to the other.
A lot of the women misunderstood that and were very, hostile to the men getting together at all. But the most hostile were really not the women, but the corporation men, because they've got a lot invested in this driving, power-ridden, let's get all this before we're 30 years old. Don't talk to me about any depth. Don't talk to me about my father. Don't talk to me about the women. Don't talk to me about any of that.
He was a figure in American life at that point who could be easily parodied.
It appears to me that Robert Bly was in the way of trying to deconstruct whiteness for himself, and certainly white maleness. I think he ran afoul of the establishment of which he would have been seen as a part. So if you're a white man and you exist in this position of power in your world, the fuck you deconstructing that for? You know what I mean? Like leave that alone, dog. Like, what are you doing?
There was all of this other work that was being done by others in the men's movement, like Michael Meade and James Hillman, his great colleagues.
James was feeling excited about sharing ideas because, he's coming mostly from psychology and philosophy. Robert's coming from poetry mostly, even though both had studied so many things.
Sometimes we'll have 150 men for a whole week in the forest, and mainly to get them away from their telephones.
Yeah.
Not because we want to run around naked in the woods. I mean, that's insane. I live in Minnesota, man. We don't do that.
It was not some rallying cry of the men's movement necessarily. It wasn't about banging drums and, shouting in the forest.
The very first conference, 83 or 4, and I hear there's this guy, Michael Mead, who's going to teach drumming to the guys in the woods. And I'm like, yeah, well, I'll be taking a walk when that happens because I am a drummer, thank you very much. In fact, a professional.
I've been really blamed for that. I have actually very proficient drummers who will say, are you the one that got all these characters drumming?
He knew how to quickly create an ensemble. And I came right back and jumped right in. Music teaches community.
It was a wild heartbeat, and you could not stay elsewhere on the property other than to go into that hall.
You're back in the womb, something. You're hearing your mom's heartbeat. That's why people move and dance, and there's big teaching there.
The wind one brilliant day called to my soul with an odor of jasmine. And the wind said, in return for the odor of my jasmine, I'd like all the odor of your roses. Chado was about 35 at the time. He'd been working as a high school teacher for 2 or 3 years. He wasn't sure he had a soul. And he said, I have no roses. All the flowers in my garden are dead. And then the wind said, well, then I'll take the yellow leaves and I'll take the withered petals. And the wind left. And I wept. And I said to myself, what have you done with the garden that was entrusted to you?
My sense of everything Robert has ever done is that it is work he has done first on himself. And Iron John was part of that. It was part of his own connection to his own feeling self and his own work with his father.
I wanted a really companionable father. I wanted a funny father, an Irish father, knowing. But what I got was a father who was serious, determined, and taught that there were certain bounds one couldn't go across, period. And I simply never mentioned him in poems at all. I didn't even want to go into that disappointment. Finally, he gets to be 80 years old, he's in an old people's home, and I decided I must go into it now, or it's never going to happen. Your head is still restless, rolling east and west. That body in you insisting on living is the old hawk for whom the world darkens. If I am not with you when you die, well, that is just. It's all right. That part of you cleaned my bones more than once, but I will meet you in the young hawk, whom I see inside both you and me. He will guide you to the Lord of Night, who will give you the tenderness you wanted here.
Iron John would stay on the New York Times bestseller list for 62 weeks and be translated into over 20 languages. BLY had hit the big time.
Iron John helped characterize him as a self-help author. And I think that did him no favors in the poetry world in America, because a lot of American poets are very sophisticated and do not want their work to be seen as self-help per se.
I remember hearing Bly's name and having terms like spiritual or touchy-feely, that sense that says this is not academic, this is obedient to something other than pure rigor.
This is something by Diane Wojcicki. Robert Bly has a fascinating mind, and his ideas are intriguing, even when he is dead wrong, as he often is.
That's right. I sometimes say ideas just to see how they sound when they come out of my mouth.
Robert likes to make trouble. Let's face it. He didn't have to make all this trouble. He must have enjoyed it. I know when I do it, I enjoy it. And I'm having a hard enough time, and I'm not the firebrand that Robert is.
The grief for our masculinity is as great as your grief for
Maybe.
Robert Bly could simultaneously be ferocious and gentle as a lamb, and then he could scare the shit out of you.
For me, we've had 500 years of being silenced.
We can't solve that here.
No, we can't.
One of Robert's great contributions is the absolute necessity to focus on grief and to not skip over it.
I just want to say with Elizabeth that I feel that this anger and everything is appropriate. We need to go into these things. We've got a lot of grief to go through before we can speak clearly.
Oh, yeah, Robert took risks with people. He took risks with everything. I always saw it as part of his Viking heritage that he's going to break new territory in whatever the area might be.
To follow up Iron John, Bly widened his critical lens to focus on the culture at large with The Sibling Society, a critical look at adulthood in modern America.
Is it possible that all the adults are becoming children? Is it possible that the adult is gone and we got only childish adults and adult-like children? I mean, is this possible? Is that what, you know? So I'm still working with that.
Here's a man who is able to be the conscience of our culture, is able to swim against the stream to prevailing sentiment, and calls us out.
The European tradition is that being a poet does not excuse you from taking part in the national debate. Exactly. And I like that kind of phrasing of it.
I think that anybody who speaks out loud, who says things as he sees them, and tries to describe the complexity of those, is going to step on toes.
The Sibling Society failed to find an audience. One reviewer called it the most important book I can't get anyone to read.
Well, I don't think he was surprised by that reaction. Robert was enough of a realist at that time that I don't think he was surprised by it, and I don't think he was particularly daunted by it either.
It's good to stay in bed a while and hear the A slyly hidden in sequacious and sent in the phrase somewhere world, the two ers. I especially like the in hidden in wood bins. Am I like the hog snuffling for truffles, followed by skimpy lords in oversized furs? For this gaiety, do I need forgiveness? Does the lark need forgiveness for its blue eggs? So it's a bird-like thing then, this hiding and warming of sounds. They are the little low heavens in the nest. Now my chest feathers widen. Now I am an old hen. Now I am satisfied.
Released a year after The Sibling Society, Morning Poems was a collection of work inspired by friend and fellow poet William Stafford, who wrote a poem at the start of every day.
They were the poems of an older man. They were mature, that's the word, more mature poems. He seemed to have found a wisdom where he didn't think it was, you know? It wasn't Rumi and it wasn't Zen, it wasn't that. It was out of his own experience. And those poems were very touching.
Bly would continue to explore and experiment with poetic form throughout his career.
He wanted poetry to turn in a different way and to be a little more open to being goofy and wild and daring in ways that it hadn't been before.
Sometimes when you've been sleeping all night in a warm bed, you notice a punky fragrance in your pajamas. It's a bit low-life, but satisfying. It is some sort of a companionable warmth that your balls created during the night. Let's say it's a mammal delight related to the cow's udder.
It's not hard to see with a poem like Morning Pajamas why Robert Bly's work is divisive. Because it's both spiritual and earthy in a way that could rub someone the wrong way.
The moose's great cock floats in the lily pads. Floating. That image calms us. His nose calms us. Slowly, obstinately, slowly, obstinately, we retrieve the pleasures that the church fathers, angry with the Gnostics, threw away. Thank you.
I went to see Robert Bly in the Bronx. I remember thinking that the 70-something-year-old man should not be asked to follow a musician who is clearly going to tear the house down. And as advertised, the musician tore the house down. When Bly came out, he launched first into telling us that what musicians have notes for, poets have vowels.
And in prose, you pay attention to the meaning and not so much to the sound. In poetry, it's sound.
I remember us saying, oh, like, it was so obvious, right? Like, you're like, oh, wow, of course. And then he launches into a performance of a poem by Yeats, in Yeats's accent.
Naked I lay, the grass my bed, naked and hidden away that black day. Now Yeats is gonna go to A's here.
And our minds were blown.
Take the sour if you take me, for I can scoff and lour and scold for an hour.
And then he got to the end and said that he did it in Yeats's accent so that we can know why Yeats made the choices he did.
Love is all, it should be. Love is all, go ahead, do this.
Robert is a guy that is in love with undoing damaged language. That's what he's done for a lot of us. He's made language beautiful, enticing, challenging again. He's reintroduced the notion that language is wealth.
Robert was such an optimist and has always believed that if you just said it well enough, we could feel one another's presence on this earth. And it was so sad for me to hear him talk about losing his hope. And when this happened, of course, this was after 9/11.
The thing about writing poetry, especially in political times, is that you understood what Auden meant in Musée des Beaux-Arts when he said, the elegant ship just passes by, when Icarus has just fallen into the ocean. While everyone passes by the tragedy, the poet must never. The poet must stop and engage.
So we're starting a thing called American Writers Opposed to the Iraqi War. And if you want to come and sign your name on it, please put down a page here and do that. Please tell me why we don't lift our voices these days and cry over what is happening. Have you noticed
The plans are made for Iraq, and the ice cap is melting. I say to myself, go on, cry. What is the sense of being adult and having no voice? Cry out. See who will answer. This is call and answer. We will have to call especially loud to reach our angels who are hard of hearing. They are hiding in the jugs of silence filled during our wars. Some masters say that our life only lasts 7 days. Where are we in the week? Is it Thursday yet? Hurry, cry now. Soon Sunday night will come. I'm going to read that for you once more, and then we'll say goodnight. I'm just saying this is a crucial moment now in our history in the last 10 years. So go ahead and cry now. This is Thursday night. Soon Sunday night will come. Thank you.
Robert has felt all the injustices and things of the world and tried to figure out how can one do with it. I think Robert understood that it was through his poetry and through his teaching as best he could.
The ancient world thought beauty was an unbelievable thing. One of the things that has happened in pop culture is you lose all of the connection with the past and the great heroes of the past. So it's always helpful for a poem to bring them in. It's strange that our love of beauty should lead us to hell. I caught one glimpse of you, and a moment later my house and books were all thrown into the fire. Plato wrote by the light from shark's teeth. There's always terror near the quiet garden. If we've come to a bad end, let's blame beauty. The horses of sorrow are always restless, breaking out of fences, trampling the neighbor's garden. The best odes are written by pirates in the moonlight. When Monet glimpsed the haystack shining in fall dawn, knowing that despair and reason live in the same house, he cried out, I have loved God. And he had. I walked down the aisles of the grocery weeping. Gleams of light came off my hair when I saw you. And I found myself instantly under the horse's hooves. My improvidence was to have been too hopeful. My improvidence was not to see the fall. I apologize to those in hell for my disturbances.
What is it for you to grow old? So many people are afraid of it, and you seem to take a certain joy in it.
Haven't seen you in here for a little while. Welcome back.
What does it feel like growing older in this world, being an elder?
I've often felt old, even when I was 35. It's as if I've been longing to be in this position for a while.
So we made a Minneapolis calendar.
I love having grown children that are not living meanly, as Thoreau would say. I love having a wife with whom I can respond as a grown person rather than as an adolescent child. I love having taught people who come to me and say that I help them with this or that. I love having written poetry that people like and admire.
I'm just so pleased. I don't have a script or anything. I'm just so terribly pleased that when the state of Minnesota decided to name a poet laureate for the first time in our state's 150-year history, they went right to the top. When my good friend here was named poet laureate, everybody in Minnesota cheered. Mr. Robert Bly.
So it's lovely to stand up here and have Garrison say something about me. We've known each other for years and years. I'm going to read 4 poems. The first one is about all the old English poets, for loving the old ones. Have you given any thanks to the old poets lately? The ones who built vowel houses in England. Kinderwolf out in the cow stall singing, Swift.
Poetry has a place to play in reminding us that attentiveness is the natural prayer of the soul, that we have souls, that we have interior lives, and they're worth paying attention to.
He taught us to respect, to understand, and to work hard at understanding what's inside ourselves as well, so that we don't end up, at the end of the day, with all the stuff, but an empty life.
Stealing sugar from the castle. We are poor students who stay after school to study joy. Isn't that right? We are like those birds in the Indian mountains, isn't that right? I'm a widow whose child is her only joy. The only thing I hold in my ant-like head is the builder's plan of the castle of sugar. Just to steal 1 grain of sugar is a joy, isn't that right? Like a bird, we fly out of darkness into the hall, which is lit with singing, and then fly out again. Being shut out of the warm hall is also a joy. I'm a laggard, a loafer, and an idiot, but I do love to read about those who caught 1 glimpse of the face and died 20 years later in joy. I don't mind your saying I will die soon. Even in the sound of the word soon, I hear the word you, which begins every sentence of joy. Ah, you're a thief, the judge said. Let's see your hands. I showed my calloused hands in court. My sentence was 1,000 years of joy.